Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to episode 20 of the K&R and Scenic Valley Railroad build. Also the third episode concerning the scenery in the Scenic Valley. If you want a little extra, be sure to watch through the slideshow at the end because there's an Easter egg in there. Anyway, without further ado, let's just head out to the workshop and get busy. Well, I am back out in the workshop again. It seems like forever since I've been out there. First I was waiting for plaster because they ran out at my local Lowe's store, so I had to order it online. And the day the plaster arrived, I injured my foot. And before that had healed, I had an infected shoulder. Anyway, everything has now more or less recovered. I have plenty of plaster to get on with, so it's back to where I left off. I still have quite a bit of rock carving to do around this tunnel and in the river valley, and then I'll move over onto the next section, being sure to leave a gap between them, and I'll either put strips of plastic bag in there or I'll leave a gap. I haven't decided yet. If you recall from last time, I have this piece removable, although at the moment there's nothing to grab hold of it, so it's difficult to get out. Eventually there will be plenty of protruding rocks that I can use as handles. And although I won't get that far today, I also want to get the retaining wall in behind the double track main line, and there'll be another tunnel portal in here. I have bought new tunnel portals. I have two more double track. I only need one today, or rather I only need one for this diorama, the other one will be a spare, and I have the singles inside. I didn't bring those out just yet. So I'm just going to turn the camera off and get to work. Well, I've used about 2/3 of a bag of plaster this morning, and I have everything on this side of the joint done. I've put strips of plastic bag in to stop the two sections sticking together. And now I've got to figure out where to go next. I haven't decided whether I'm going to start at the front or at the back or somewhere in the middle. It doesn't really make any difference. It's all got to get done. Anyway, don't go away. I will check in with you again later. Well, I've done 12 batches of plaster today. I don't feel like doing any more. I started this area in front of the camera now, around the top of that cliff face, everything around behind the tunnel and the cut, to the top of this ridge, both sides, the river valley all the way up under this bridge, and around the back to the backdrop, this piece of cut, and this rock face down here, all the way to the bottom. Well, after getting most of the remaining rock work in that area carved yesterday, today is going to be a different kind of progress. First thing I need to do is get the tunnel portal installed. This is a Woodland Scenics double track cut stone portal, and as we can see it is actually just about big enough to allow double stacks and auto racks and things to go through. It's slightly complicated being on the curve, and I had to position it very accurately to get enough width. Let me go around the other side and show you something else. This is a good example of what happens when you don't have wide enough sub-road bed. I need to install a retaining wall along here, and as you can see I didn't get this quite right. I didn't allow enough space for it, so I'm going to have to attach more plywood to the edge. I'm just going to cut some thin strips and glue them on, which means I won't be able to continue with that just yet. I'm going to have to get on with something else, which is a little annoying because I really wanted to do that next. Well, I've added an extra 1.5 inches along the back edge, all the way along. It's more than I need, but it's better to have some leeway, some tolerance. I've also got the tunnel liner gluing up in another area of the workshop, and this whole project just got more involved because I managed to break the portal casting. So I've also got a U-shaped piece of plywood glued to the back of that as a splicer, and I can't really touch that or move it until it's dry. So I'm just going to have to get on with something else while I let all this glue set up. So don't go away, I will check in with you again later. Well, I've let this glue set up for a few hours. I've also spray painted the inside of the tunnel box and the splice plate for the broken portal casting a flat black. There's no reason why it has to be spray paint, but it's a lot quicker than getting out regular paint and then cleaning up the mess afterwards. It also dries in a few minutes, so I'm ready to take off these clamps and get those bits installed. So let me do that and I'll be right back. Well, I've now cut all the retaining wall pieces to size and test fitted them. I have a temporary piece of plywood clamped up at the back so they don't fall off and break. Obviously that one's too big. I've made another wall out of 1/2 inch. It's in 2 pieces because I'm using up offcuts. But that's basically going to be glued in there so that I can attach the retaining walls to it. That'll make it nice and strong and give them plenty of support so they don't get broken. Well, I've now glued those 2 pieces in place. I've also glued the first retaining wall section because that will help to reinforce the corner. I'm not going to put the rest on just yet. I want to let that glue go hard a little bit because I don't want to risk pushing it off the edge and breaking everything. And of course, now that I've put 1/2 inch thick plywood up there instead of 3/4, it's not really wide enough to get the clamps on and still be able to have the front clear to attach the panels. So I'm just going to leave that for a bit and get on with something else, and I'll be right back. Well, I've stacked all the foam in the back, and as you can see, my workbench has now gone. I have moved it over to the other side of the aisle, and now I can continue filling in the landscape in this area where the workbench used to be. Well, I have now finished stacking up the foam in this area, and I have both tunnels in. I completely ran out of 2 inch. I had to start using 1 inch thick foam. Anyway, I'm not going to start carving that today. I'm going to let the adhesive set up overnight, and then I will come back in the morning and start shaping it. So don't go away, I will check in with you again tomorrow. Well, here is how I left it yesterday. All the foam is now nicely glued on. The adhesive has set hard. Today is not a full day. I did all my errands in town this morning, so it's already after lunch. So I've got about half a day, and I'm not quite sure how far I'm going to get, but the first order of business is to get all this foam shaped and just keep cutting until I think the landforms have a pleasing shape. So let me just get my tools out and I will check in with you again later. Well, that is all the rough shaping done. I think I'm reasonably happy with it, although I'm sure I will find places where I need to modify it once I've got the plaster cloth on. That always seems to be the way of things. So the next thing I've got to do is mask off the rest of the track, and then I can get the plaster cloth out and put a white skin on it, turn it into a snow scene. So don't go away, I'll check in with you again later. Well, that is all the plaster cloth done. There's a couple of places where I think I might want to update it, where I might want to modify the shape slightly, as there always is once I get to this stage. But tomorrow I will just start the rock work, probably at the tunnel portals, and work my way back towards the valley that I've already done. There's not a huge amount still to do. Obviously that end is by far the greatest quantity of plaster. So I will check in again with you tomorrow. Don't go away. Well, that is 6 batches of plaster, and I think that is a pretty good morning's work. I have done everything from this end around over the tunnels and about halfway along the back, and most of the little rock cuts for the front track. I've still got 2 bits missing in here and in here, but other than that the first 4 feet is done, and at this rate I should probably be able to finish the rock carving on this area this afternoon. So I'm going to go get some lunch and I will continue later. Don't go away. Well, that is 10 batches of plaster, and I thought I was finished. So I cleaned up all the mess, vacuumed everything, and then I realised that I have a little tiny bit in here that still needs doing, so I'm going to have to mix another half cup of plaster just to do that piece. And then it will be ready for colouring and sculptor mould. I'll probably start that this afternoon, but I won't be able to finish it. Anyway, before I continue, let me go back and fill in that missing rock carving rather. Well, that missing piece of rock has now been inserted, along with another piece over there, which I felt improved the appearance of it. Next thing I've got to do is get some colour on all the white plaster. I'm not going to copy the experiment that I did on this area. I don't really like the way it turned out, so I'm going to go back to my original order of things, and then I will just blend it into that probably tomorrow or the next day. So I'm just going to go back to my original system of starting with a black wash. Let me do that and I'll be right back. Well, I have got the first black wash on, and I found 2 more areas where I'm missing some rocks. There's a little bit here in the stuff that I did a few weeks ago, and a little bit by this tunnel portal on the very first batch I did today. So once again I have to mix up another cup of plaster to patch up those 2 areas. Well, that is both of the wash colours on. Yes, I know the rocks look ugly at this stage. They'll lighten up very slightly overnight, and then the dry brushing will add a lot more lightness. Anyway, I've had enough fun for one day, so don't go away. I will check in with you again tomorrow. Well, I've dry brushed the rocks with 4 different colours. Started off with a light grey. It's actually granite grey if you buy the apple barrel paints at Walmart. And then I used a brown oxide, which is a light brown. And then I went with like a goldish colour. It's actually labelled khaki, and I used that for the 3rd dry brush. And then lastly I use an antique white. Actually, I didn't have antique white available today, so I just added a spot of the khaki into otherwise plain white, and that gives a sort of a cream or antique white colour. And that is the final dry brush. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is fill in the dirt areas. So I have my 25-pound box of sculptor mould and a gallon of dark brown paint, which I'll be mixing in with it. Well, that is all the sculptor mould put on the dirt areas. It was only a half day's work, including the painting, but I don't feel like doing any more. It's Friday lunchtime, and I don't think I feel like getting ready to start framing up again on the third level. My plan is to come out tomorrow and do some ground cover in this back corner where it's a long reach from the front. Although I'm going to leave most of it to work on with the client during the installation process. Here is the area after a few more days. You can see the variation in the colour. That's a telltale sign that some of it is not even dry yet. It's dry enough to continue with the next layer of ground cover if I wanted to, but I've decided to go back to bench work. Once I've got the upper level framing in over this area, I might decide to do some work in that back corner, reaching down through the frames. Depends on how difficult it is to reach in there from the front. Well, that is all for this week. Hope you enjoyed the video. At this point I left the scenery alone and went straight into the third level bench work. That portion of the scenery will be finished with the client after installation. So I hope to see you again next week. Thanks for watching and bye for now.